Hello, and welcome to Six Figure Authors, the show that helps you take your writing career to the next level. We're sharing our own insights as authors who have been publishing since the beginning of the e-reader revolution, and we're also interviewing industry experts and other successful authors to help you figure out what's working right now. I'm Lindsay Buroker, and I'm here with my two co-hosts.
I'm Joe Lallo.
And I'm Andrea Pearson.
And in this episode, Joe and I are interviewing Andrea. And we recorded this a few months ago. We weren't quite sure that Andrea was actually going to come on and become a host. So there's nothing about that in the actual interview. So if it sounds like it's a little out of date, that's why. But I think all the information you give on talking about book launches and stuff will be still useful to everybody listening.
Yeah, it's still accurate. I mean, we recorded on June 25th and today is September 18th. So I mentioned in the interview that I'd switched from MailChimp to a new newsletter provider, and that's called Sendy. And I wanted to give an update on that. I'm still using them, and I'm still loving it. They're powerful and reliable, and it still only costs me like $3 a month, which is absolutely fantastic. And MailChimp just increased their prices. So for me, I have only about 300 subscribers over there, and it's costing me like $60 a month. And so absolutely ridiculous. So I'm going to be moving everything to Sendy now.
Sounds like a good plan. I was going to say that's more than I pay at AWeber for 20,000 between my two lists. So, ouch.
Yeah.
All right, and I guess we'll just go ahead and jump into that interview right now, and hope you guys get something out of it.
Yeah.
Enjoy.
Hey everyone, we're going to be talking to fantasy author and mailing list aficionado, Andrea Pearson, today about how to rock your mailing list, get more subscribers, and sell more books. And we'll probably cover some other marketing stuff too, because we've met Andrea in person and we know she loves to talk all about marketing. She and Joe and I were at Chris Catherine Rush and Dean Wesley Smith's Business for Authors workshop a couple of years ago. And Andrea was always pulling people aside to have marketing meetings where Joe and I were like in the corner, like, oh, should we be like speaking with people at this? Is this like a networking thing? How does that work? So welcome to the show, Andrea.
Thank you.
Now, for folks who haven't listened to the previous interview we had with you, how about you tell us a little bit about how you got started in writing?
Okay, so the listeners for this show are going to be authors of all genres, right? Stuff like that. Okay. It's a new show. I haven't listened to any of your podcast episodes yet. Let's see. I didn't grow up wanting to be an author or wanting to be a writer or anything like that. My sister was the writer in the family, and she was kind of a competitive person. Like, she chose writing. Nobody else could do writing, just her. And when I became an adult, college and living on my own and doing adulting things, I decided that I wanted to go ahead and try writing, and I wrote my first book, and at that point, I wanted to get it published, because why not? You write a book, you want to get it published, right? But at that point, I hadn't researched a whole lot into publishers, and so I didn't have any publishers in mind or any idea on how to get it published. But I did have it up on a website called autonomy.com that was run by HarperCollins, and an agent came across it. He offered to represent me, and he helped me get a contract with the publishers of Twilight, which I ended up turning down. And because I was a paralegal and I was like, this contract's horrible. Why would anybody sign a contract like this? And I didn't know that that's just the way contracts were for authors. And so I turned it down, and I ended up self-publishing, and that was early 2011 when my first book came out. And it was right around the time I got married, and my husband is pretty much a 100% business partner in it, and we've been indie publishing ever since. And it's great. I love it. I've got over 50 titles under 3 pen names, and absolutely love being an indie author and publishing and marketing and all that.
Now, you kind of embrace the marketing side, whereas I think a lot of authors get into it and then they don't sell any books, and they're like, well, shoot, I'm going to have to figure out what am I doing wrong? I thought these would just sell. Is that from your old background at all, or is it just something you enjoy doing from the beginning?
It took me a while to figure out where it came from. I found out that my mom actually wanted to major in marketing, and she was in charge of conventions all growing up. Her job was to get people at the conventions. And she was super passionate and excited about it. And it just rubbed off on me. I just love marketing and reaching out to people and figuring out how to get things to sell and why they're not working, and figuring out how to make them work better and things like that. It's become a passion. I enjoy it.
And how many books do you have out today? I guess we're about 7, 8 years since you got started?
Yeah, I've got around 30 novels, 4 or 5 nonfiction books. I've got a bunch of illustrated books for kids, and then a whole ton of middle grade books and some Western romance. Mostly everything I write is fantasy, and and then a bunch of short stories and novellas and things like that.
Now, as I teased in the intro, we're going to talk about mailing lists in a little bit, but I am curious. I know you had a son just a few months ago, I think. And could you talk a little bit about I'm sure you took some time off, as one does, to give birth. Could you talk about how you're kind of keeping the business rolling while I assume you've kind of cut back on your hours a little bit?
Yeah. Okay. So, every pregnancy is different for everybody, right? And I was hoping that this pregnancy would be an easy one, but it was not. And so I ended up getting really sick while I was pregnant, and so a lot of my writing had to get put to the back burner. But I ended up focusing on other things like the marketing and the business aspect. I tied off a whole ton of loose ends that I could find before my baby was born, and I stockpiled a ton of projects for my assistant to do while I was recovering and adjusting to having a new baby. And then it took me about 6 weeks after the baby was born before I was able to start writing again. But luckily, I had releases that were going wide to all the other retailers, and those are still in pre-order periods, still getting released. But I also started hoarding money, because when you're not releasing books, you tend to drop in royalties a bit, and basically gearing up to a big launch that I have coming up in October. Now that I've got the baby and he's a couple months old, I arrange to have babysitters come twice a week for about 2 hours, just so I get in a solid chunk of writing every single week. And because I dictate, I can do about 10,000 words in 1 hour. And so that's enough for a week, Let's see. And my rule is, when that babysitter's here, I only edit and I only write during that time. And then that way, during the rest of the day, when I have a few moments here and there, I can focus on other projects that, like when my brain is too tired to write. And let's see, I also focus on rebranding my nonfiction side of my business. Just basically a whole bunch of different random projects that, like you said, keep my business rolling. We did take 1 week off, we did take several weeks off from the podcast my husband and I run for authors. But I only took 1 week off from emailing my newsletter list, because last time I had a baby, I took 2 months off, and everything kind of, it fell apart for a couple of months, and it took me a while to get my royalties back up again and get going again. And so I knew I couldn't afford to burn out that much again. And so my assistant's been instrumental in keeping my weekly email going. And another thing, this summer, since I'm not launching anything until August, I've been focusing on doing basically direct sales to my readers through BookFunnel, so that I have, that stuff for them, so they have something to read and download and things like that. And what I've done there is I just gather old series, put them in one box set, add new author notes, a couple new stories, illustrations, and things like that. And then I sell it direct to them, so that I get moolah, because money's awesome.
Yeah, it sounds like you're working as hard as most people do who have not had a child recently. Because I know just getting a puppy last summer threw off my game for a while. I was like, yeah, for a couple months she'll be crazy and I won't be able to work. And it's a year later and she's still crazy. So
she's cute crazy.
Babies to the next level.
Yeah. Well, the good thing about babies is they do eventually grow out of needing to be fed constantly and potty trained. So they eventually become self-sufficient. Like my 6-year-old is a huge help. She'll run and get diapers for me and things like that. And actually, I mean, before I had kids, I published 3 books, and then after kids, that's when everything else came. And so I figured out how to be a better author by structuring my life around my kids' schedules. And so just making every minute count, so I've actually been more productive since having kids than I was before, because I'm not going to be done being a parent for a long time. So I had to make it work,
Right. And I think everybody's had that experience where if you have the whole day to work on something, it takes the whole day to get as much done. But if you had somewhere you had to go, or you've only got 2 hours, you do seem to focus a little more, hopefully.
Yeah, it's true. I've heard that people, when they quit their day job and they go writing full time, they, like, the first 2 months, 3 months are, they're all over the place trying to get back into a good schedule. And I mean, you got to give yourself time to relax too. You know, you just quit a job, so sleep in for a few weeks.
You mentioned some of the things you were working on. I think I too would be able to do some of the marketing stuff more with distractions going on than, I don't know, I need my little special cocoon with like my headset on and music to get in the flow and write. What kind of things did you do to try to, I don't know, are you running any promos or things to keep that backlist selling until like you're ready for your next launch? I think you said in October.
Yeah, it's in October. So yeah, I've been focusing on my backlist. I've got ads, Facebook ads, things like that running to it. I like to constantly tweak things on Facebook just to make sure that those ads are still working. I'm very much a project person though. And so I don't write every single day. That's not something I've ever been able to do. Like I don't do the dishes every single day either. So that's why my husband's like, okay, I'm doing the dishes every day then. So I'm a project person. And so when I'm working on a book, I will binge and get it done in about a week or 2 weeks. And then, the writing and then the revising a week and send it to my editor. But, like when I have a kid, like I actually will put the book on my phone using Evernote, and then I'll edit it while I'm up in the middle of the night, just so that I'm taking advantage of every spare moment I have. But yeah, so just random things. We're in the process of buying a new car. That's taken a lot of my time. It's so time consuming.
Now, earlier you mentioned your assistant, and first off, is this like a full-time employee or is it like virtual assistant? Like, what's the nature of your assistant?
She is a virtual assistant. She lives across the country from me. She's seriously an angel. I think that, yeah, she's like my guardian angel. She's kept the company running for me a lot of the time. But yeah, so she's not full time. I do keep her busy depending on what I'm working on. Yeah, after my second baby was born, that whole burnout phase that I went through, that's when I started using her whole time. She'd actually been with me for a few months before that, but it wasn't until I went through that huge burnout phase that I started to actually rely on her a great deal. And I've not stopped using her since. I also have an audiovisual guy who does my editing for my podcasts and my courses and YouTube videos and things like that. And so that one's my brother. I can't fire him as easily as my regular assistant, but my regular assistant's now like a sister. So now I can't fire her either, but they're great people. So yeah.
What kind of tasks do you assign an assistant? Like, I know that sometimes it can feel a little weird to give up the reins on stuff. So like what jobs do they do?
Let's see. So I'll start with the nonfiction side. I am a control freak. I love editing my podcast. And so I'll go through, and my husband and I, our podcast we talk about movies, and we take writing, examples and tips from movies and apply them to authors and things like that. And my husband's he's funny. Sometimes he says things and I'm like, okay, I'm totally going to cut that out of the episode. And sometimes my brother's like, no, keep it in. And so if I go through and I remove stuff that I don't want in the episode first, and then I send it off to him, he'll go through and make sure the audio quality is okay. He'll add in our little sounder thing at the beginning and the end. He actually is the one who uploads it and things like that. My virtual assistant, Adriel, she, let's see what I have doing for her. She's doing a lot of the grunt work. Sorry, Adriel. That's why I hired her. She's doing a lot of the grunt work for the launch, researching authors and to do newsletter swaps with, and websites for promotions. Let's see, I have her organize my weekly newsletter list. So if I'm doing a newsletter swap or if I'm involved in some sort of promotion, I have her go in and put that stuff in. I send pictures of my kids to my readers every week. So she'll go in and actually add those to my emails every single week. And then I go in and I add my part, and then I send the email. Let's see, what else does she do? Let's see. She does pretty much everything. I have her upload for me. She formats books for me and runs promotions for me. Yeah, it took me a while to get to the point where like you were saying, where I was ready to hand off some projects to her, because being the control freak, I think most authors are, this is your world and you're protective of it. You want it to be successful. And so I handed things off to her little by little until I was able to hand off pretty much everything to her. There's a couple things that I still haven't handed over to her because, there's no reason to. But yeah, so there's a lot of stuff that she does do for me, though.
It sounds like it made a lot of sense for you to take someone on since you maybe do have some limited hours now and you really need to make the best use. And, you know, doing those little things might not be the best use of your time. You need to create the stories and your podcast. When do you, for somebody that might be thinking, should I get a virtual assistant or somebody local? What made you consider that? Was it that you were going to have children and you knew you'd have less time, or you just reach a point in your business where you thought, I need some help?
I reached the point where I wasn't making more money because I was spending so much time doing things that were better done by somebody else, somebody qualified who wasn't a writer. And so when it started taking time away from my writing, then that's when I hired her. And then also, like, one thing that I always tell my clients and just other authors in general is sometimes it doesn't make financial sense to hire an assistant. And my husband and I live debt free. We don't advocate, getting into debt, but sometimes when I hired her, I actually pulled money from our personal lives to finance her in the beginning until her work overtook, basically paid for itself, so that my book royalties caught up and exceeded. And then now, of course, the business pays for her completely. But in the beginning, we couldn't technically afford her. And so my advice for authors is always, if you're at the point where you would be producing more and the only thing holding you back is money possibly, but also all those little random tasks that would be so much better having somebody else do, then, borrow money, or not, from your personal side or your grandma. I don't know. Like I said, I don't advocate borrowing money, but we did use personal money to pay the business, which to me is borrowing money. But if we hadn't, I don't know that I would have, it prevented the burnout from continuing. So that's my advice. If you're at that point, then take on help. Or downsize. So it's either, one or the other.
That's a good tip. And I introduced you as a fantasy author in the beginning, but I guess we should mention that, you said you do a YouTube channel and you've written some nonfiction books for writers. And I think you do some courses. Do you want to talk about that a little bit and how, because I know a lot of people want to just live, I just want to be a genre fiction author, and just make $1 zillion doing that. But it seems like a lot of people find that they should do a mix of that. And they're also interested in teaching authors or offering services. And that can become as much income or more income or, 50-50. How did you decide to go into that?
I love teaching. I love marketing, and I'm an extrovert and I like talking to people. But I would rather be at home with my kids than out at conferences and things like that. And so I found that I could still help people by having courses and having my books and my podcast. And of course, the podcast is free. My books are like 99 cents right now. And then the courses are between $25 and $50 per course. So my goal isn't to make money. It's basically to simplify my life. So if I have somebody who has questions, I'll be like, here, the answers are right here in my course. And if it's somebody I'm working with already, I'll just give it to them for free, And so the courses, we have made money off of them, but that's not their purpose for me. I don't look at them as money makers. I look at them more as a way to help me, build my nonfiction business, basically get my name out there so that when I do approach authors for like fantasy swaps and things like that, they recognize my name. I do make the majority of my money on my fantasy side. I'm more passionate about being a fantasy author than I am about being a nonfiction author. I have ideas for more nonfiction books, but it just doesn't pull at me as much, And so, if you go and look at my nonfiction books, you can tell that I never promote them. They've got like 1 or 2 reviews on them. They're just there basically for me to give away or, to direct people to my courses and things like that. And so, yeah, I'm a horrible, what's the word? I'm horrible selling myself as a nonfiction author. So.
No, I would struggle too. Like, I enjoy teaching and talking talking about this stuff with people, obviously, or we wouldn't keep doing podcasts. But it can be, I don't know, it can be intimidating, the idea of like creating a course and like asking people for money. And even though you know what you're talking about and you have value to give, if you're kind of an introvert, I think that's a challenge too. Is it's easier to say, hey, try my fantasy, it's fun, Whereas I can teach you things, give me money.
Yeah, no. And seriously, with like the nonfiction stuff, with people who are like, well, your books don't have a whole lot of reviews on them and things like that. I'm like, well, I take what I teach and I apply it to my fantasy stuff. So you go look at my fantasy stuff, they're well reviewed and things like that. But yeah, I guess some of it is definitely a little bit of, I mean, I'm an extrovert, but I'm still, what's the word? I'm still not super out there and like, hey, take my courses and everything. And so it's that whole rejection, I post and I'm like, hey, go buy my courses. And if I don't do a huge thing the way the authors that have the big courses that cost a lot of money do, then you don't get a whole lot of results. But I don't have the time to make it big. And so I'd rather be more, these courses are for educational purposes and they basically pay for themselves. So like the $25 goes to my brother who's, is the one who edits the courses and things like that, rather than stopping everything on the fiction side and focusing on nonfiction and making a huge release and making a lot of money there. I'd rather just have them there for a way to represent what I can teach and then focus all my time on my fiction and kids,
Right. It's almost like we've talked about having, if you do a pen name, you're going to have to basically create two author platforms. Same thing with nonfiction, because they're not really going to sell each other. So it's something somebody has to be into and decide they want to do, and doing both.
Yeah.
So I guess we promised to talk about mailing lists and how to rock them and help people get more readers to sign up and buy books. So first I want to ask you, because I think you used to be with MailChimp, or maybe you still are. And back in May, this is 2019, in case anybody stumbles across it in the future, they made some changes. So could you talk about that a little bit? Did it affect you? And are you still recommending them as a mailing list host for authors?
Okay, so the changes that MailChimp made, they're kind of pivoting in their business model. It's not a huge pivot, but it is a pivot, and it's kind of upset a bunch of people. So what they've done is they're basically making it so that unsubscribes count toward your total subscription, so total subscribers. So you're getting charged for unsubscribes, and the reason they're doing that is because they want you to be able to take those unsubscribes and say, retarget them on Facebook or something else. So you can still use those email addresses and still have the information for that. You can't obviously email them because they have requested not to hear from you again, but that doesn't mean you can't, create a lookalike audience on Facebook for them or something like that. This only applied to people who were in the free, the free plan or whatever, up to 2,000 emails. And that was a lot of my clients. And so I had a bunch of them asking me, what do I do now? I don't want to be paying for my unsubscribes. And so I decided to start researching a newsletter providers for a course that I was going to give to them. And I started digging in, and I actually found out that a lot of newsletter providers do that. Aweber, for example, they also charge you for all of the for all of the emails who have unsubscribed, and for the ones that are currently subscribed. And there's a couple others that do that. But I recommend MailChimp if that sort of thing does not bother you. They're still a very solid option. I don't use them. I do still have an account with them, and I do still have subscribers there. I still have my auto sequences running there. But I'm actually now using a program that costs like less than $5 a month. It's called Sendy, and what it is it's something that it's a one-time fee of like $59, and you host it on your domain, wherever you host your email. So like me on GoDaddy, it's hosted there. And then the emails are sent through Amazon's SES, which is like, I think it stands for Simple Email Solutions. And so they handle the bulk email, the sending of the emails, and then they charge you for those. They don't actually store the emails. The emails are stored on your domain. I know I've had a couple of people say, but aren't they going to compare that to your reviewer email lists and remove reviews? And it's not. They won't do that. They don't actually track the emails themselves. But they charge 10 cents for every 1,000 emails you send, or $1 for every 10,000 emails. And a lot of authors, that's going to be like $5 a month, if you email like once a week or even once a month. It's technical to set up if you don't understand what a CMARC is, or a CNAME, or a TST file, things like that. I would recommend hiring somebody to do it for you. You can set it up. You can hire somebody on Fiverr for $10. They'll go and set everything up for you. And once it's set up, you don't have to pay for it ever again, except for Amazon sending the emails. And the good thing about it is Amazon is super, super picky about how they how, they're very, very powerful. Their email program, how they email people, it almost always goes through. And so they're very picky about whether emails are spam or not. And so you get better deliverability through them than you would through another program. They're also very solid. They pay, their whole system and their whole business is based on email. And so they're very careful about reliability and deliverability. And so they are actually, they're not going to like fall apart and crash and things like that. I mean, it's Amazon. They'll probably die eventually. Every company dies eventually. But like for my clients who don't want to have to deal with setting up on their domain, there's actually several companies that do Sendy like options, and they have like, drag and drop campaign editors and things like that, and just all sorts of things that you can do. And they cost a little bit more, but they're still like $39 for 25,000 subscribers. I mean, it's just insane compared to MailChimp and Aweber and ConvertKit, which, by the way, I used to think ConvertKit was the most expensive option. It's not even close to the most expensive option. There are some very, very pricey newsletter service providers out there. Anyway, long answer.
Right. That's good to know. That'll be an interesting option for people to check out. Are you able to, like, if you're with another host right now and you wanted to take all the email addresses and start through them, would that be possible? Or do you just kind of have to start from scratch and ask people to, hey, come opt in over here?
Are you saying like take your emails from your old provider to Sendy or whatever? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, like let's say you have a MailChimp list already and you want to migrate it over to this. Is that possible?
Oh, yeah. No. So once you buy it, it's yours and you do whatever you want with it. So I just uploaded my email addresses and sent out my emails. And I've only been on it for a couple of weeks. Let's see, what's the date today? Today is the 25th of June. And so whenever this goes live, I've been up for a couple of weeks on it. And yeah, so it's pretty much yours. They don't do anything. There's no hand holding. They don't ask you to resubscribe. Basically, once you buy it, it's in your hands. And whether you crash and burn, it's on you and not them. They're not even associated with it anymore. And so, I mean, you want to make sure you can't, work with Amazon unless you guarantee that you have, permission to email these people. And so, or Amazon will make you crash and burn. But yeah, so once you've got it, then all the power's in your hands. And that's what I love about it. Like they're not going to cancel me unless I start doing something stupid. Like MailChimp, Aweber, ConvertKit, these other providers, they do sometimes have these rules that if you don't read the fine print, you're not aware of. And when you're doing a program like Sendy, the fine print is like 5 lines long and it's very easy to understand. And once it's all set up, it's pretty foolproof unless you're actually doing something legitimately stupid, which most authors don't do.
Yeah, I don't think we're usually the people who are just, I don't know, real aggressive types with our email marketing.
Yeah.
Okay, let's say people have this set up or they're with MailChimp or Aweber or someone and they're wondering I guess what are just some of the basic things that we should be doing as authors trying to get people on our list, and then what do we ask of them or what do we send them once they're there?
So I'm big on reader magnets. I think that is a great way to get readers to want to join your newsletter list. I think every author should have an automation sequence set up, drip campaign. I think pretty much everybody who listens will know what that is by now, right? I'm just assuming. Maybe I shouldn't assume. Should I assume?
Well, this is our new podcast, and this is our first show really going over mailing lists. So, okay. We'll probably have some people that are on the newer side.
Okay. So an automation sequence is basically, it's a series of emails that you set up to go out automatically based on some like things that you set up, like triggers and things like that. And so when somebody signs up, then the first email, for example, they could get your free download or whatever you're using to get them to join your list. And then the auto sequence just happens automatically. And it's something that you set off to the side where you don't have to think about it. And it helps readers come to know, like, and trust you so that you don't have to be doing that the whole time. And I do recommend that authors also email regularly, no less than once a month. And Mainly because if you're emailing only when you have a new release, it's kind of like buy, buy, buy. Hey, you haven't heard from me for a long time. Will you give me money? You know? And so, but it's also good because then the companies that they have their emails hosted with, so like Gmail or Yahoo or whatever, when they recognize you and see that you're emailing regularly, they're less likely to call you spam. And yeah, so I like in those emails, you want to make sure that you're focusing on being yourself and putting your personality into them. And some people are like, but I don't have a personality. I've gotten that a lot over the last year. I'm like, yes, you have a personality. Everybody has a personality. And the thing is, like for example, like my husband, we'll take him as an example. He's a very sarcastic person with a very dry sense of humor. And people at first are like, was he trying to be funny? Was that a joke? And then some people are like, oh my gosh, I'm so offended. And then other people just love it. And I'm like, every reader has a perfect author, and every author has a perfect reader. And your goal is to find the people who fit your personality type, because people don't necessarily buy anymore because of good authors. They'll find their favorite authors and they'll read those people, but they're going to also look for people that they match with emotionally too. And so, for example, I'll have people on my newsletter list who have never read anything I've written except my freebie, or even not that in some cases. And my emails, I get weekly responses from readers that say, hey, your email got me interested in your book, and I read it and I loved it, and I'm reading your books now. And so if your emails have your personality in them, then your personality is going to be in your books too. And so readers, it's a natural segue from, your emails to your books and things like that. And I found that does help with a lot of downloads and things like that. Let's see. Did that answer the question?
I would say that it did. Yeah. Okay. There's a couple of things about newsletters. There's a couple of things about writing in general, but newsletters in particular that feel like a little bit of a catch-22. Like, for example, you mentioned reader magnet, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, a reader magnet is going to draw people into your newsletter. But how do you get your word out that you have this reader magnet? Like, what is the nature of the reader magnet?
Okay, so for me, my reader magnet is a box set of stories that are related to pretty much all of my fantasy series. In the beginning, I was doing one book or books that were just random books that, that I didn't sell very often. I would just give those out for free, or I would give out the first book for free or the second book or a related side story. And I found that only targeted readers of one series or maybe two series. And so now I give a box set that has a whole bunch of stories in it that are from all of my series, all of my fantasy series, so that if somebody likes one fantasy series, they get something from that series, and then they can also be introduced to my other series through that same box set. And so in order to get that, the word out about that, I do promotions on a permafree. And so permafrees are really, really easy. I know it's that whole, do permafrees still work? They do still work for me. You have to mix things up. Occasionally I'll have a box set be a permafree for several months. And so I've got a 10-book series. A box set from that series of books 1 through 4 is not a huge financial burden for me to give away for free. And it actually increases my downloads. And so inside that box set, I'll have information on the exclusive box set the readers can get by signing up for my newsletter list. And so if I'm pushing that box set, then it naturally builds my newsletter list, which also naturally builds my ARC team and gets reviews on my books, because I have that as all part of my auto sequence. Yeah. So there you go.
All right. Now, like some people, this is the 6-figure authors. Some people have been doing at this for a while, and newsletters can sort of go stagnant. You'll start off a newsletter and you'll be getting dozens of new signups, and it just slowly trickles down. Do you have any sort of, and this also goes for people starting a newsletter, but do you have any sort of advice for like jump starting or revitalizing a newsletter that maybe has slowed down or hasn't gotten started?
Yeah. Okay. So jump starting a list, so jumpstarting and revitalizing is kind of like the same thing, right? But jumpstarting is like when it's completely dead is the way I picture, you jumpstart a car. So in that case, I would probably do list building things. I would try to re-engage the current readers, but I'd also focus on adding to it, because sometimes people, if any of you have ever watched Better Off Ted, there's a line in there, everybody dies, Linda. So sometimes, things happen. You don't know what's going on in your reader's life. And I have had, emails bounce back. I've heard back that some of them have gotten sick, they don't read anymore, or they've passed away, or they've completely change their lifestyle and things like that. And so you can't just expect that once they wanted to be on your list that they still want to be on your list. And so I'll do things that will re-engage them. So I'll do giveaways, I do contests, I'll do newsletter swaps with other authors. Let's see. Yeah, so you'll get a lot of bad email addresses at that point. So if you start emailing again after you haven't been emailing for a while, you will get bounces, you will get unsubscribes, and that's not a bad thing. You want to make sure that you're also focusing on cleaning out your list and things like that. You don't want to have a whole lot of dead weight in there. And I'll talk about that, I guess, in a little bit if I remember. But I do multi-author. Lindsay laughed.
This is what happens when we give the questions ahead of time. You're like, oh no, wait, I won't talk about that for 3 more questions. Back to this one.
Yes. Yeah. So I like doing the big newsletter list builders because I've found very, very dedicated readers that are just as dedicated as my organic subscribers through those types of things. And so when my list is starting to die, I'm like, I will go out and do some big newsletter builder and things like that. And I'm very, very careful with them. I make sure they go through a completely separate automation sequence. And if they're not engaged, I cut out all the dead ones and then put all the good ones into my main list. But those ones, they become just as dedicated and as my others. But like I was saying, your personality will attract the ones who resonate with you. They'll stick around. But yeah, so I would start emailing regularly, like once a week, once a month, or whatever like that. Ask them what they want, give them freebies, and then, like I said, clean out the ones that like the dead weight and things like that. And there was a question at one point, wasn't there? I think there's a question in the future that Lindsay was talking about.
No spoilers for 2 questions ahead. I love this idea of putting together a bundle of all of your bonus stuff from different series. Because right now on my sci-fi list, it's been just kind of like I keep adding things like here's the download link to the new, background short stories. And so now there's like 8 things for people to download. And I'm like, oh, that would make sense. I could just put them all in one box set and then have, keep it tidy with only one link for them to download. So
yeah, and what's great about that
feeling.
Yeah, like with I used to have like up to 8, freebies, and I didn't want people to join from one spot and say, hey, wait a second, why did they get this free book and I don't? And so I'd have them like in my automation sequence, but what it turned out to be was a whole ton of free books. And so I found that putting them all into one box set simplified it a great deal so that readers weren't feeling like I was going to be giving them a whole bunch of free stuff all the time. It was one item, but because it's a box set, it's a bigger item. And then on the book cover, I'm in the spine, I've got, listed 3 or 4 of the stories. And then at the end it says, and more, so that when I have a new series come out, I can add more and not have to change the book cover. And then all I do is go into Book Funnel and I add the description to the Book Funnel description. And so it's super flexible,
That makes a lot of sense. And then if you're just doing things like short stories, you don't have to worry about getting a book cover just for this thing that you're going to do free to your mailing list. So yeah, I will keep that in mind for the next time I want to take a day and kind of, figure that up. And yeah, at least it's easy to format. I'd have to get a new cover to encompass all the things in the bundle. But yeah. Sounds like a good idea. And we should point out, at least with mine, I put exclusive stuff in there that they can't just go choose to buy from Amazon. Is that what you also do?
Yeah, everything that's in my box set except one instance, all of it is stuff that they cannot get unless they sign up for my list. And those types of things, I've gotten so many more downloads on them. And you don't want them to be just like random things that are, so a side story that's not involved. I try to pick something that intrigues readers like heavily. Like if it involves romance, a lot of readers, why was that character thinking that at that point? And so then I write a little story about that. Why was he a jerk? Write a little story about that. The things that people ask you about the most, write a story about that and stick that in there and then make it be exclusive. And it's really enticing.
Right. I've definitely found out that if you have it as a mailing list freebie, but you also have it for 99 cents on Amazon, a lot of people are just like, I'm just going to pay the 99 cents and forget that mailing list stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
So you mentioned kind of that you get people from maybe the back of the book when you run the perma-freeze and probably get some new signups that way. And then you also, it sounds like you do some maybe joint promotions with other authors, and might have two separate lists that you later move people over into the other one if they open stuff. And can you explain that in case somebody's interested in, I don't know, keeping like a gold list over here, and then maybe these are the people that they like my free stuff but haven't purchased yet, or what do you do?
Yeah, so that was the question that I was hinting at earlier. Yeah. Okay, so what I do is I'll create a completely brand new list, and it's not going to be one that has complete, news statistics, everything. I don't want it to have anything attached to any of my other lists. And I send them through a newsletter, an automation sequence that is designed to get readers to come to know, like, and trust me, or to introduce me to them. And basically I treat it as if they've never heard of me before. And so the first email is very short. It's not going to have a whole lot of stuff about my personality in it. It has that freebie. And then I'll have like a video at the end of it that says, that's me introducing myself, so that they kind of get a feel of who I am. And then I send them each email that goes out will have a little bit more about me, until I've sucked them in with all of my kid pictures and videos of me and all the psychoticness that is my personality. And then, but at the end of it, then sometimes I'll have an email that says, if you want to stick around, let me know. But generally what I do is at that point, I just get rid of people who are not responding, not opening and clicking. And then I move the ones that stick around into my newsletter list that is my main list. And so some authors will keep everything segregated all the way throughout. And that's really a great idea if you have the time for that, because that helps you know which promotions are ultimately the most effective. But I don't have that kind of time. And so I will have them be in their own automation sequence in their own list, and then I join them back together into one list. And usually, like I was saying, at that point, I found that the people from the giveaways and from the multi-author promotions, they tend to be just as dedicated as my organic readers, because by that point, a lot of them have read something I've written. A lot of them feel like they know me, and then that way my main list is more representative of, more organic readers in that case.
I assume you have a different list for your nonfiction and your fantasy. What would you recommend for someone that's maybe doing sci-fi and fantasy, or fantasy and contemporary romance? Should they have different lists, or just do some little play around in the background and try to segregate people when they sign up so that they only get emails about the genre they're interested in?
Lindsay, we don't believe in segregation. Okay,
I'll get flagged because I use that word once the search for once Google can search audio.
Yes.
Rankings.
And then your podcast will go down.
Yes.
Okay, so it depends. My question is always, how much time do you have? What's your life like? I do know some authors that will join their lists and they'll have tags on separate genres and things like that. I like keeping everything completely separate, because then I can look at each list individually and see how healthy they are completely separate. I don't have to dig down into tags or anything. And also my question for people is always, well, how much do you care about Amazon algorithms? Because if you care about Amazon algorithms, then you're going to want to keep your list separate. My nonfiction authors, they don't care about my fantasy, or I just assume they don't. Maybe they do. And a lot of my fantasy readers don't care about my romance. A lot of readers don't switch genres very easily. And so Amazon algorithms, they pay attention to the traffic that you're sending to those books. And if you're sending one link to all of your readers who read the Western romance and the nonfiction and the fantasy, then they're going to, out of curiosity, maybe like, well, what does her new book cover look like? Or what does her description look like? Or wait, what? Andrea writes another genre? And even if they don't care, they'll go and check it out. And so that causes problems on the Amazon algorithm side. Or what you can do, if you don't have the time, you just want to have one list, send them to a website that requires them. So like my main website, at the front of it, it says AndreaPearsonBooks.com, and it has an option to click on fantasy, Western romance, or the sweet romance, which is all my romance, or my author stuff. And then once they get to that side, then they have to click again to get to the books on each of those sides. And so it causes them, it makes more work for them, basically. So somebody who's not really interested is not going to end up clicking all the way to Amazon. And so that helps there too. And you can do that as well. But setting them up in the beginning, that's where the most of the time is. And once you've got it all set up, then it doesn't take a whole lot of time to keep those readers segregated, And so it's just, requires emailing separately regularly too, which I don't email my nonfiction list. I think the last time I emailed my nonfiction list was probably 8 months ago, but and my romance list was probably a year ago. So fantasy, that's where my attention is. So yeah.
Yeah, it can be hard to come up with things for one list if you're only publishing in the other list this year. But I've done that and had long gaps and just restarted it when I switch back to that genre. And you'll get some unsubscribes, but then you'll be like, I've been waiting. Other people will be like, I've been waiting and waiting for you to come back and start writing in my genre. So I feel people are generally forgiving.
They are, yeah.
So you mentioned that when you do like a promo, you might have a series of autoresponders with, pictures of your kids and maybe some freebies. Do you do the same thing with the organic signups that are coming from the back of the book? You mentioned you've got this bundle that you can send them to. Do you then email them again? 'Cause I assume people will know that you can set it up to like every week something goes out for the first 6 weeks, or you just say, here's your bundle, and then you're just going to get the regular broadcasts after that.
I have a different automation sequence that is a little bit more personal right off the start, just because usually by the time they finished a book, they want to get to know me more. And so I give a little bit more of my personality in the beginning. So I have several different autoresponders, and they're absolutely powerful. I think that they're wonderful. So the first one has the link to download the box set, and with the related stories in it. And then each email, like I said, will introduce me to them. And there is, you can, if listeners want to, they can go and listen to our last episode, the one on science fiction fantasy marketing podcast, where I actually talk about the autoresponder sequence that I use the most. But now the things that I do differently, I do have a video in almost every single email of me talking to my readers. I started doing Facebook Live videos, and I've found that if they hear your voice, they respond better also, like they feel like they know you. Just like me, when we went to the business masterclass, I was like, Lindsay, hey, how's it going? You don't know who I am, but I listen to you, so I know who you are. But yeah, almost all of them include pictures. So the whole goal with them is to help them continue to know, like, and trust me. Just because they've read one of my books doesn't mean they're going to remember my name in a week or even a day, So actually there are studies that have shown that people don't remember an author's name until they've read 4 or more books by that author. And most people don't remember the names of the books. And so you want to do your best to help them read your books, get through a series, and come to know you. My autoresponder for my main list includes an email that asks for them to post reviews, and depending on which book I'm focusing on. So right now I'm focusing on a book called The Shade Amulet. And if people go and look at it, only about 40 of those reviews came from my ARC team. The rest came from people on my list that going through my autoresponder and saying, yes, I would love to review your book for you. And then I also asked them to join my ARC team. And then, I just throw random things in there sometimes. Like my husband and I went through a phase where we wanted food that was really good. So we were asking for recipes. And so I had an email in my autoresponder that asked for recipes along the lines of the food we were asking for. And so that was very helpful too. So it just depends on what you're working on. If you want to poll your readers and find out where they're from, you can add an email to your autoresponder that automatically asks them, where are you from? How did you find me? What's your age? What's your gender? What do you normally read? How long do you read a book? What price point is a good price for a book? And things like that. Just anything you want to find out. And I have found that readers love it when I ask them these kinds of questions. They absolutely love being involved. And so I do polls quite regularly. They're fun to get too, fun to read through their answers. People are very blunt sometimes.
This is true. I had my very first series I wrote. I still get a lot of email. Like every time I'm in a poll, like, what should I write next? More books in that series.
You're wasting your time, Lindsay.
I know. Like, I don't like any of your other stuff. Just write more in that series than those characters. I'm like, all right, I'll keep it in mind. Thank you. That's a good tip to add, like ask for reviews on whatever, 4 weeks in or something, because I know a lot of people, like a good place to ask for reviews is in the back matter of a book. But if you ask for too many things, like in the back matter, they're probably only going to do one thing. So I'm always like, well, what's the most important thing? And usually that's like, get them on the mailing list. And then later you can ask for the review if you need it.
Yeah, and I've actually found that if I ask for reviews before I invite them to join my street team, I'm more likely to get legitimate people to join my street team. And so what I do is I ask them to post a review, and then in order for them to join my street team, I require them to post reviews on 2 books. And if they've at that point they've already posted a review on the other one, then they only need to post a review on one more book, and then it's easier for them to join. And then that way I'm getting people who are actually going to be posting reviews. And so that's been really helpful too.
Right. It's like you can't make bargains with people, like Amazon's terms of service, or like you can't just say like, I'll give you a free book if you give a review, but that's kind of a way to vet them. And you're getting people that do reviews because they already did reviews. So that's a win. All right. My last question before, I think Joe has one too on newsletters, but my last one is just, do you have any tips? First of all, I guess, what is a good open rate for an author to expect? Because I feel like we have really high expectations, not knowing what the industry average is here. And then what are some things that people can do to improve? You've kind of talked about asking questions and polls and stuff, but to get a better open rate and more responses from their people who have signed up.
Okay, so it depends on the genre when it comes to good open rates. Fantasy has been inundated with authors asking people to sign their lists or join their lists. So I found, open rates have declined there. A good open rate is between 30 and 50%, with most authors being around 35 to 40% and sometimes 30%. If you're lower than that, then you should look at cleaning your newsletter list, getting rid of the dead weight. And having a healthy newsletter list is really good because it helps you know when something is actually working. If you have a whole bunch of people that never open, it dilutes your efforts, so you can't tell if your latest email was actually working. If you can't tell if that subject line actually worked or not. So that's a good way to get them to open regularly and open. It's kind of a catch-22. If they're not opening regularly, your emails aren't going to get to them. And if your emails aren't getting to them, then they can't open regularly. But you want, so in order to get them to open regularly, you start at the beginning with them. You build a good relationship right off the bat. You don't screw around and not email at all and then start emailing, So you want to set the basis and the foundation in the beginning for what you're going to be doing. And of course you can always change that, but if you can get them opening regularly from the beginning, then obviously it's going to be easier for them to open regularly later. So if you're starting out later and you're trying to figure out how to increase your open rates now, I recommend studying what makes a good subject line. Switch things up, go and Google good subject lines, and then test things out. Do A/B testing, split testing. Be creative. Don't use like your book title always in your subject line, because people who aren't opening your emails, that book title doesn't mean anything to them. And you want to do that sometimes for people who do open regularly. Don't put the words like free and giveaway or sales or things like that in your emails all the time. Sometimes it's okay, but it actually will flag your email a lot. And one thing that I've also noticed, that if you put like $signs inside of your email, like my book is 99 cents with the $sign, that increases the chance of the book the email ending up in a spam folder somewhere. And so sometimes I'll say like $9, BUCKS, so that it doesn't flag things, and that's probably gonna end up getting flagged eventually. So basically studying what opens, good open rates, keeping your list clean so that you can tell what's actually working and what's not working, and email regularly just to keep people engaged so that, Gmail knows that you're a legitimate person.
Okay. So now let's imagine that somebody didn't do any of that and they ended up with a list, and they have a list that's been going for a while, but the list has not been pruned. It needs to be rehabilitated. Like, how do you get rid of dead weight on your list?
So I think it depends on how long it has been since you last emailed. I would recommend do not create a new list. Don't move those emails to a new list. Leave them where they are, because you can flag your account and get your account suspended if you haven't emailed in a long time. And so, for example, I had an email list that I didn't have an easy way for people to unsubscribe. This is back in the Stone Age. They would email me to ask to be unsubscribed. And when I moved that to MailChimp cleaned. I mean, they yelled at me first off, and then they're like, you need to clean this list. Email them individually, ask them to resubscribe. And I know that some newsletter providers will actually delete email addresses when you do that. And so you're going to want to keep it where it is and send out 2 emails. So one that reminds them of who you are and maybe offers a freebie, and I would have inside that email, I would actually have a teaser that gets them started reading, because people are lazy. They won't click away all the time to download. But if you can get them in that email reading something that intrigues them, then you can usually get them to download. Not usually. It's hard. Sometimes you can get them to download. Yeah, like 95% of people of a dead list, they will download your freebie. That's not what I'm trying to say. It's hard to re-engage a dead list. And then the second email, ask them to either resubscribe or ask them to respond with a yes, or have them fill out a Google form if they want to stick around, or just pay attention to the opens and clicks, and then take the ones that are healthy, put them in a new list, start a new list with that, because the dead weight will drag your numbers down. And like I said earlier, it's hard to tell if something's working if you have a whole bunch of people that aren't going anywhere. I don't know if I ever recommend the nuclear option. Like I said, it depends on how long it's been since you last emailed. I think that sometimes, like, people's lives change. They can go from being interested, not interested, but they can also go from being not interested back to interested again. And so I think it's safer to send an email and risk. I would pull it personally and do it from your author email directly rather than from, let's say, MailChimp, just in case, depending on how big your list is. If your list is really big and you have, if you get too many unsubscribes, something like that, your account will get suspended. So it just depends how big your list is. Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, let's wrap up with a couple of extra other marketing things rather than just newsletters, in case anybody's eyes or their head's about to explode. We're up to 2019 now. So what are some of your favorite marketing tactics that authors should be implementing that are still working here in 2019, assuming they're doing all the things you already talked about with the newsletter?
Okay, so there's one that I'm really passionate about, and I think I'll talk about that list last. But I think read books in your genre, indie books in your genre, reach out to those authors and work with them. If you're passionate about a book, your readers will be passionate about it. That author will get good results from you. You can build relationships based on a mutual love for a person's book. And that relates to the one thing that I want to talk about last. I'll go back to that. Facebook ads still work for me. I know that a lot of people say they don't work. I think that what happens is people get set on one tactic and then they're like, it's no longer working. Facebook ads don't work anymore. That means you need to mix things up. So try automatic targeting, try aiming for impressions instead of clicks. Just try different things. Mix up your images and your descriptions. Follow authors on Facebook and start paying attention to the ads that get sent to you. If an ad has a lot of has a lot of comments and a lot of likes, a lot of shares, then you know that ad is probably doing well. So see, copy what that author is doing with their ads and do that with your ads, and just experiment with things all the time. Amazon ads still work. My husband's the one who does Amazon ads for me. I'm not into that side as much anymore now that I've handed it off to him. But he says that the automated keywords work really well on Amazon right now, not necessarily keywords, those thousands of lists of keywords that authors used to do. We have a theory about that. Amazon used to encourage up to 1,000 keywords because Amazon's algorithms were learning what was working so that they could better improve their automated lists and suggestions. And so now their automated lists are actually working better than their automated keywords, are actually working better than keywords that authors are coming up on their own. I think that rapid release is still a good option. If you can't write quickly enough to do a huge rapid release where like once a month you're releasing, then write 3 books and then rapid release those and then write the rest of them and then take a couple months off, 3 months off to focus on other things and then write some more. But my most favorite one, this is something like, why are not authors not doing this more? I don't understand. Download bonuses. When I have a new launch or a new release and I want people, and I really, really want them to do it, I do download bonuses. And so so I get like 75 to 100% to 150% to 200% more downloads when I use download bonuses. And download bonuses can be anything from like an illustration or a books or short stories, or I've done word search puzzles. I've done color. I'll take my book cover and convert it into a cartoon for people to color. Because, back in the day, those adult coloring books were really popular. They're still popular. People just don't talk about them very much anymore. And then when readers, what they do is, and this is totally legal, by the way, a lot of legitimate companies and people do this that are not in the indie author world. So you can send out an email, you can set up some download bonuses that are based off of things that you know your readers like. You can ask your readers ahead of time, what would you guys like as an incentive to download a book? And then you set it up to go out automatically when somebody forwards proof of purchase to your, like, a Gmail account. So what I'll do is I'll do like a dummy email address, call it book title download bonuses @gmail.com. And then you can set up Zapier to automatically email them a link to download their download bonuses. And so the download bonuses that I like the best are, and my readers actually like them the best, are exclusive stories from me that aren't available anywhere else. These are going to be separate from that exclusive box set that people get for free. And they're going to be like not really long. It's not, you don't want it to be a huge time commitment on your part just because, so don't give them like 10 books for free or something like that. But one of the other things that I do is, so when I find an author whose books I love, I will reach out to that author and I'll say, hey, how would you feel about offering this book for free to my readers who download this, my book that I'm focusing on? And what that does for me is it gets people to download my books, but it also allows me to share some of my most favorite authors with my readers. So for this book launch that I have coming up in October, I've got 2 other authors' books in it. I'll have 3 of my own stories in it. And these authors, they have other books that are absolutely fantastic. And so I get to introduce my readers to some of my favorite authors' books, but it also gets that author, it leads readers to their other books as well, so that it benefits them as well. And so I'm very passionate about download bonuses. I think they're fantastic. And I don't know that I've heard of any other indie authors who do them regularly like I do. I don't know. Have you?
I don't think we've discussed this before. And I just want to clarify, because I'm curious, do you mean you put the link at the back of the book and says, send a proof of purchase to this email address? Could you just put a link to the download bonuses in the back of the book? How are you? I guess it's too complicated. I want to.
So you can put a link to the back of the book, and that's not a bad idea. But the thing is, sometimes, I don't know what Amazon's rules are. I don't want to encourage people to download and then return just so they can get the free stuff. That would actually work really, really well. That's not a bad idea, Lindsay.
I just want to make it clear so I understand, because I like that. That'd be kind of fun to send, like, here's a word search with my character names and my world stuff, and just a fun thing for them to, I don't know. And is there anything afterwards you're trying to get them on your list with the emails, or?
Actually, you know what? I think putting the link to the download bonuses at the end of the book might be against Amazon's terms of services. Because you remember how people used to have links for giveaways at the end of the book, and then Amazon shut down those accounts. So I think that actually, I would have to look into that a little bit more. What I do, in the past, I've not even mentioned in the book anywhere that there are download bonuses available for it. I don't put it in the description on the book. I will do it on my newsletter side, or like if I'm running a multi-author promotion, I'll have that information on the blog. I'll put it on my website. If I'm doing a blog tour, I'll have all the blog tour hosts mention it. And then that way, it's just cleaner on Amazon's side. I don't want to run into any problems where Amazon thinks you're trying to cheat. Like, especially if you're in Kindle Unlimited, if you have a link at the end of the book, readers are going to click back to that. And then that could trigger Amazon's hate people, and they'll, ruin your account.
No, I'm curious now, because I always put a link to my website. So you could it seems like you ought to be just go to a specific page on your website that's for that book. And here's the stuff. But yeah, I understand wanting to make sure you're not angering the Zon and by doing anything that could be construed as, I figure if they bought the book and the link was in the back of the book, at that point, you're just here, go to my website, more stuff.
Yeah. Then the other thing about that, though, is when I do download bonuses, they're time sensitive. So they only are available within the first week of the book is launched. And if you put it in the book, people who read 6 months later, they're not going to be available anymore. And the reason for that is I want them to download within a specific period so that I can catch, make the ranking and catch Amazon's email system. So if your promotion is not time specific, then I think that would work really well, putting a link at the end of the book where it doesn't matter if they don't download right away. But a download bonus, the purpose of them is to get them to download and immediately. You want them to download during that specific week. And so I tell my readers that the download bonuses are only available until the end of that launch week, so that just so I can get them to download the book during that time. Though you could do it where you say, I'm uploading a new version of the book that will no longer have the link in it at the end of that week. And so then that way they could still get their download bonuses, even if it takes them 6 weeks or 6 months to read the book. And then, so that would actually be a good workaround. I'm liking this. Thank you for helping me brainstorm for my next book launch.
No, I like this too. And I see what you're saying about if you send it out to your list as an incentive, because people do that too with, like, if they launch at 99 cents, like, oh, you can get it for 99 cents, but you have to get it this week. But then you had to launch at 99 cents to your favorite people who would probably be willing to buy at full price. This instead rewards them for getting something early that they were going to eventually buy anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm liking that. That actually saves a lot of work if you put the link in the back instead of, Zapier is wonderful. I don't know if you've heard of Zapier before. Have you?
I have heard of it, but not used in this context. I think you said that was how you were checking the proof of purchase and automatically sending them the stuff.
Yeah. So what you do is you set it up so that their little zap, it's like their automatic task. So readers would forward a screenshot or their confirmation email from Amazon, and Zapier, as soon as that email comes in, they automatically send out an email that you type up, and it goes to them, and it includes a link to the download bonuses. And sometimes people are like, well, how do you keep people from sending fake proof? Well, first off, you don't tell them it's an automatic email. Second off, I've never actually had anybody, and I've been doing download bonuses for a long time, I've never had anybody email a fake proof of purchase, or whatever. I always make sure, so that it doesn't trigger the automatic email, I make sure that they know that they have to email me with questions. They cannot email that email for anything other than the download bonuses. And I have either myself or my assistant monitor it, and I let them know it's not going to be something I'm going to answering emails at, because if you answer it, then they answer back, then that triggers another automatic email, So anyway, and that's also, it's helpful that way, because then you can see how many people are downloading the download bonuses. Whereas, sometimes it's hard to tell. Like if you've got like an image on a website, you could have them go to it, but you don't know how many people are right clicking and saving it, right? But the emails, I leave them all unread in that email account, and then I can see at a glance, look, 300 people have taken advantage of the download bonuses so far, and things like that. Zapier is amazing. There's not anything they can't do. And they actually work with Sendy. So if you end up doing a Sendy system, that the provider I was talking about earlier, Zapier actually works with them too. And so it's a very powerful company, application, website thing.
All right. We will put a link to it for sure. And I just thought I'd chime in. I'm kind of having the same experience with AMS ads right now. I actually launched quite a few of them with my book launch in June here, that the automated ones are actually the lower bid. Like I'm getting the clicks for less, and more of them are converting to sales. The only thing is that I don't get nearly as many impressions with those as when I just say, like, oh, target the whole sci-fi, space opera, space exploration genres, which is not, it's good. Like, you don't spend tons of money if all you really care about is selling the book. I think when you're in that launch couple weeks, I feel as if you have the money to spend, maybe it's worth it just to have your book everywhere in the sci-fi category popping up, assuming it's a series and it's going to earn out if, you can afford to spend more on book one. But
yeah, I agree with that. There's different marketing tactics. You want impressions sometimes. People have to see something how many times before they buy? Isn't that, they say it's like 7 times. And so sometimes marketing campaigns where you're aiming for impressions rather than conversion, that's not bad. It's a good idea.
Last thing I wanted to ask you about is, and I'll put a link to the Sci-Fi Marketing podcast where you were on, and because we also talked about BookBub ads, and I thought that was a pretty good show for that. You have a Facebook group, I know that I think it's kind of branched out into more than just BookBub stuff, but are you still using them? Are you do you like their pay-per-click or CPM ads right now, and how do you feel about that?
So the BookBub group is more about the marketing side and getting features with them and just all sorts of promotions, websites, and things like that. I've actually not really dug into BookBub ads, probably because I focus on Facebook. My husband focuses on Amazon. Neither of us have a lot of bandwidth right now for anything else. And so, I always say we're going to dig into BookBub ads someday, but we still haven't. That day still hasn't come. We're both getting good results off of Facebook and Amazon. And I do know authors who have had a lot of success on BookBub, but I've not taken the time to go into dig into it.
All right. So I guess I have one last question is, when we were setting this up, you mentioned that you've got, and we mentioned a bit earlier too, that you've got a big launch coming, like a major launch for your next thing. Are you trying anything new for this big launch? Or is this going to be just all the old tactics more so?
It's going to be all the old tactics. Just kidding. No, well, it's like a mix of new stuff and old stuff. So my goal with this is to basically, every time I do a book launch, I'm experimenting with something new. I very rarely do repeats, and so I don't know if this is going to actually work, but my goal is to see if a rapid release would work with all retailers and not just in Kindle Unlimited. I do have an existing fan base on other retailers. I make more money wide than I do in Kindle Unlimited, probably because I can't release more than 3 or 4 or 5 novels a year. See kids as a reason. And so my goal is to get about 8,000 downloads on the book, The Shadow Prophet. It's releasing in October. So some people are like, well, are you aiming to get a list? It's probably not going to make a list with just 8,000 downloads because it's October. That's when traditional publishers are releasing as well. But I do want to see if I can get wide traction very quickly on this series. It's a brand new series. And so what I'm doing, so some of the old, some of the new, I'm doing a multi-author promotion. I do those regularly when I have a book launch. I make sure my book is at the top. I tell authors that only 99-cent books are available. In that promotion, I'll mention the download bonuses. So if they download this, they can get those download bonuses. I'll be doing promotions through websites, so like ENT and the other websites where if your book is brand new, it doesn't matter. And then I've got a couple merchandisers that I'll be reaching out to and saying, hey, can I get a little bit of love on this new release? And newsletter swaps. What I'm doing with newsletter swaps is I am going to be reaching out to about 400 authors, fantasy authors, and with the goal being 100 newsletter swaps. And just during that week, that main week of the promotion, there's a little caveat with that right there. I don't want to overwhelm my readers. And so I will be spreading out my end of the bargain over a whole year, just because, if somebody has a big launch coming up and say February of 2020, then I will share their book in February rather than me doing it all at one point. And then I'm also, because sometimes if you do too many, I just want it to be beneficial for the authors who are participating. And so I'm also going to be offering 1 or 2 of my courses, my marketing courses for free, so if you would rather get a marketing course instead of having me tell my readers about your book, that's an option. And then, like I said, I want to reach 100. I want to swap with 100 authors. And so not everybody's going to say yes. So I'm going to be reaching out to like 400. And then my goal is to spend around between 7,000 and 8,000 on Facebook ads, or just on this launch itself, just to see how, what that sort of a big push. Because I've never done it. I've done it between $2,000 and $3,000 on a launch before, but I've never done anywhere higher than that. And like I said, I like experimenting. I want to see what will happen if I do this. And I feel like this book, out of all of the launches I've done so far, it's a good potential solid one to get those, a bunch of downloads. Like the hook is hired to assassinate a woman, or the woman he loves. He's a demon hunter and he gets hired to assassinate the woman he's in love with. And like I said, I'll be using pre-orders, and I'll be tweaking my Facebook ads during the pre-order period just to see, say I'll have one ad running for 4 days. How many pre-orders do I get during that time? And I won't be telling my readers about the book at that time either. And then I've got a website set up where it's got the description of the book, the cover of the book, and at the end it says, if you would like to know when this book is released, join my newsletter list and get this exclusive box set for free in the process. And I've had a bunch of people sign up already, even though the book is only up for pre-order on non-retailer websites. And then let's see, I'm going to also, about 5, 6, maybe 7 weeks before the book launches, I'm going to start emailing it in chunks to my readers and asking them for feedback on the book. My objective with that is if my readers like the book, then other readers will too. And then at the end of each new section, I'm going to have links for them to take action. So I'll have a link to a form where they can go and give me feedback on the book or what they've read so far. I'll have links for them to pre-order and get their download bonuses. I'll have a link for them to enter a giveaway and all of that. And I think I did mention I have a podcast. My husband and I have been updating my listeners every single week on what I've been doing so far leading up to that launch, just so that I can break it down for authors who are interested in following it. Because, who doesn't like knowing what's working and what's not working?
No, I'll be interested. I'm sure we'll touch bases before then, but I will be curious to see how everything goes for you. That sounds like a lot of work. You're making me tired. I was asking you, how are you getting by as a new mom, only working a few hours a week or whatever you're managing?
So I actually started planning this book launch back in November, December. So what you're hearing is stuff that's been going on for several months. And so it's not overwhelming to me because I've been brainstorming and working on it for a long time. And I'd actually put together a to-do list for every single month. I don't go by days. I go by months, and then I break it into weeks. So my goal is to get these things done by the end of the week. So if I have a day where I'm sick or the kids are sick, it doesn't crash the whole plan. And then and then I have my assistant stuff on that list as well, so that we can both check back and say, this is where I am on this part. And there's certain things in there that it doesn't matter if the ball gets dropped on. Actually, most of these things, it doesn't matter if the ball gets dropped on. It's not like I'm going to stop being an author just because I forgot to, write a short story or something, So I'm not putting a lot of pressure on myself or on my readers or on my husband or anything like that. It's just organization, just making sure I had it organized from the start, and that's helping me with any levels of stress.
And that's, I think that is one thing, if you're not a super fast writer and writing 6 or 12 novels a year, that it makes a lot of sense to when you are going to launch a new series to maybe put more into it, knowing that, you can't just pick up the slack with book 2 and 3 that are coming out 2 weeks later. You got to, this is the series maybe that you're working on for the next 3 years. So it makes a lot of sense to really try to give it a good start there.
Yeah, and one thing that I've noticed, one thing with myself, I've never done a big book launch before, except the last book in my second series. I had a huge launch on that one. My goal is not to have big book launches. My goal is to have my backlist selling. And so I generally put most of my focus on my backlist and then just release books rather than making them big. But I decided to see how this one would do, So everything that I've talked about with this launch, you can do that with a book that's been out for 5 years. It's stuff that it's more of an evergreen type thing. Doing newsletter swaps almost always works, and spending money on ads and things like that. And so if somebody is, not having a new release coming out soon, but they still want to generate traffic and buzz and things like that, they can still do something like this for just a random promotion and see if they can get a BookBub feature, at the same time.
Yeah, that always helps. It's a little depressing to know that one BookBub feature, if you can get it, will equal all of the effort you put in to get 100 letter swaps,
It's so true.
All right. Well, we've kept you for over an hour, so we better let you go. Why don't you tell us, you mentioned your podcast, but I don't think you said the name, and we'll put the link to it. And anything else you want to mention, your website and where people can find you?
Let's see. So my podcast is called Self-Published Strong. It's a podcast that my husband and I do together. We have guests on about once every quarter, sometimes once a month. And we take bad and awful and great movies, and we basically take tips from them and writing things, craft ideas from them that authors can apply to books. And then we make it so that it's basically a craft/marketing show. And so I'll give marketing tips. We give motivational quotes, and then, like I said, craft and ideas based on bad and awful movies from 4 authors. Sorry, we're at the end of the podcast episode. I can tell my tongue's all tangled up. But so if any listeners, if they're big into movies, if they like movies, or if they just enjoy marketing or want to keep up with my launch and things like that, then this is a good podcast for them. We've been going for about 1.5 years now, which is crazy. And I haven't told anybody about the podcast because our lives have been so insane. We moved. I got pregnant right after we moved. I had a baby. And so we've been doing it, plugging away at it. And we've got 2 reviews because we haven't told anybody that it exists. But, and if authors, if they want to do a newsletter swap with me, if they write fantasy, or if they just want to ask questions, they can reach out to me at Andrea@selfpublishstrong.com, or my regular email address, which is ap@andreapearsonbooks.com. And I do have that BookBub Promotions and More group, which I don't use it a whole lot right now, so it's pretty quiet at this point. But I will be going back to doing live marketing tips every single week in live videos once my life calms down a little bit. And they can actually go and watch the videos that have already been posted there. And yes, that's pretty much it, right?
I think so. All right, cool. Well, I will make sure to get all the links there, and hopefully we'll get this up in the next couple of weeks. We've been banking a few episodes, so for anybody that stumbles across the podcast, they'll be like, whoa, where'd this come from? There's just 5-6 new episodes. Excellent. And I will let you know when we're live and send you the link, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It was fun.
So long, everybody.